Afternoon all. Let's have a look at a very interesting casual game played in Paris 1858. So way back then in the romantic era of chess. We have playing white Paul Morphy and playing black Adolf Anderssen. So Paul Morphy was an American chess player considered to be the greatest chess master of his era, an unofficial world chess champion. He was a child prodigy. He was often called the pride and sorrow of chess because he had a brief but brilliant career, then retired from the game while still young. Adolf Anderssen was also considered one of the greatest players of his era and another kind of unofficial world champion. So the first official world champion came later when Zukertort and Steinitz battled each other out for the first official title. But these guys were the kings of their era. So Paul Morphy kicked off with e4, and we saw e5 and a king's gambit, which was very, very popular at the time. It was accepted by Adolf Anderssen. After knight f3, we see a critical test for the move g5. In fact, here I think Fischer may have mentioned d6 first before g5, but still the same idea, just to avoid any knight e5 probability from white possibility. So d6 is also interesting perhaps here. Okay, so after g5 in this position, white has the undermining move available, h4, and it's difficult for black to react now to just simply support the pawn. If h6, for example, then hg, and we've got a problem in the h-file. And the problem with moving it forward, like in the game, well, the thing is, it does weaken black's structure, pawn structure. And you can imagine if this pawn's taken, we've got some isolated pawns, we've got potential f-file attack, and other stuff going on. Okay, so here we see the move knight e5. Okay, and black plays now knight f6, which hits the e4 pawn, offering up g4. Now, in the very famous, more modern game of Boris Spassky against Bobby Fischer, Boris Spassky played d4 here, and basically remaneuvered his knight to d3. So after something like d6, the knight was able to come to d3, and a very interesting game ensued. But in this game, the immediate knight takes g4 was played. Okay, and black took on e4 here, and it seems quite dangerous that black has access to this g3 square, because both f4 and h4 have weakened basically the g3 square, and knight g3 does seem like an important threat to have to deal with. The interesting thing here, Paul Morphy does now, which makes the game very sweet, is that knight g3 is basically encouraged from Paul Morphy. He plays the move d3, positively encouraging the knight to come round for dinner. Okay, so knight g3, and now not moving the rook. This is the point. If the rook moves here anyway, queen h4. The rook doesn't want to move on the h-file. No, the idea is revealed now. And to play this, Paul must have seen quite a few forcing moves in advance. So he plays bishop takes f4. So offering the rook sacrifice. So knight takes h1. An alternative here, which we'll look at in the second pass maybe of this game, is queen e7 check. Maybe less immediately greedy, but quite effective. But for the moment, let's just continue with knight takes h1. Now the forcing sequence begins here. Queen e2 check. Now in this position, bishop e7 is not possible. That would result in mate in 2. Check and mate. So queen e7 is needed. After queen e2, queen e7. And still we have some useful forcing moves available for white. Knight f6 check, forcing king d8. And another clever forcing move here. But note, white is already a rook down. So this next forcing move, although seemingly impressive, still leaves the material situation almost in balance. So the move is bishop takes c7 check, dragging the king out, drag and drop tactic, to be forked here. No other move to take, so knight check. It's not the end of the game. If we look at the material situation, black had already munched a rook, then there was a bishop sack from white, and now using the knight to take the queen, being recaptured. So materially, this position is not so clear. It's not that convincing. One important aspect is this knight. Is it going to be able to come out and come back, maybe to the center? Well, in game continuation, in this position, the move queen g4 not only deprives the immediate knight g3, but it also protects the h-pawn. There might be a technically stronger move, which we'll check out in the second pass of this game. Okay, so the position is still, black has the obligation to keep playing here, and he's got a lot of material for the queen. So d6 attacking the queen, and the queen goes to f4. And now another move which sort of ignores white's threat to take on f7. Black just plays rook g8 in this position, which does offer the possibility that maybe knight g3, then knight f5. That would be nice. As it turns out, in this position, white takes on f7, hitting the rook. Okay, and black now possibly had rook e8 as an alternative to what was played. So bishop takes h4 check was played here, leaving a couple of loose pieces now potentially in the position. So king d2, okay, and now seemingly very dangerous move in this position, rook e8. White has to be very, very careful because of the possibilities of bishop g5 check all the time, and this knight obviously is ready to spring into action, and this bishop is also ready to use this diagonal if needed. So a move like knight c3 might not be very good in this position if Paul Morphy played knight c3, and we'll check that out in the second pass. He plays actually the move knight a3, which gives the king an escape option of the c3 square in some variations. Now here is where I believe black really blundered actually. He's got these two tactical liabilities really. Loose pieces are tactical liabilities. And he plays the move knight a6, which doesn't help the stranded knight on h1. Not too much. So white now tries to win material. He plays queen h5, and this is looking good for winning material. Black's counter with bishop f6 seems perhaps clever at first sight, but bear in mind it's only a casual game between the two. So black's idea, if he can take here, then that would be nice. Take here and then maybe come back for a check. So that would be more than adequate if this knight is munched. Okay, but the knight is munched. Queen takes h1, and what was overlooked actually after bishop takes b2, that white has a very important resource to get the queen back in the game quite quickly for other tactical operations, and that move is queen h4 check, which changes the situation quite considerably. Now here, if rook e7, then rook e1, and that's pretty nasty on e7. It's difficult for black to defend e7 there. If king c7, there might be knight b5 check as an example, to get out of this kind of fork, double attack from the bishop. Now king d7. Well, white already has some good options here, like queen a4 check. So he's out of the woods really in terms of that knight being protected. So in fact he can celebrate that fact that he's got queen a4 as a resource just by playing rook b1, offering the bishop the a3 knight. And in fact after bishop takes a3, queen a4 check, black actually resigned here. Okay, maybe it's not the most technically accurate game ever, but bear in mind it was just a casual game in Paris 1858. The players themselves have been behind some of the most beautiful games of chess ever played from the Romantic era, and you know, maybe it's got some interest, this game, from a beautiful value of giving up the rook basically in the opening, and how that can lead to a kind of firework display later. So let's have a look in as a second pass through this game. So the King's Gambit, generally not considered too sound nowadays. So g5, already the engine really likes black, of course. So h4. Okay, I mean the move d6 as well is an alternative, but you know, g5 the engine likes as well. Okay, g4, and we see the move knight e5. Okay, which in some ways is more flexible than knight g5, because the knight can also, you know, as well as take on f7, can also take on g4. So queen e7 technically is an interesting move to consider here, as well. So this kind of position might be tricky for white. The engine really doesn't think too much of the King's Gambit though. Fundamentally, of course, it's not meant to be such a sound opening. So let's go with the game continuation, knight f6, and we see the move knight takes g4 here, giving black apparently a significant advantage on this depth with just knight takes e4. But clearly the engine hasn't factored in giving up the rook here, or if it has, it's looking at other resources for black which are quite cheeky to interpose here. In fact, so d3, knight g3, bishop takes f4, and the strongest move apparently is missed here, not taking the rook immediately, but taking time to take the rook potentially, or not even taking the rook, as the case may be, with the move queen e7 check. Now this would be a good resource for black here, queen e7 check. So if bishop e2, there's an option now of the aggressive rook g8, just offering the knight, and black has good play here, I believe, in this position. So say taking here d6, black has a good active game, but it's not so clear really. If it's less than half point, it's not really that clear what's going on there. Okay, so that's an option, queen e7, but no, the rook is taken, and now chances are given almost, you know, about equal. It's not really a big deal. 0.15 is not such a big deal. So check. So this forcing line now, check, bishop takes c7, necessary for white to regain material. And so here, you know, maybe the stronger move technically was knight c3, apparently. And we got roughly equal chances, but queen g4. Okay, so d6, attacking the queen, queen f4, accurate move. One of the best moves in the position here. Queen f4, keeping an eye on g3, attacking f7. It's also kind of rule breaking that white's not really developing the pieces, but continually moving this queen and getting away with it, and again taking a pawn with the queen. So here technically black apparently has rook e8 as an improvement at a certain depth. Rook e8 would be a technical improvement. So say king d2, knight g3, queen f4, knight f5, the chances are roughly balanced here, with black maybe slightly better. Black has got a lot of material for the queen. Okay, so if we go back to the game though, bishop takes h4 check was played, which requires some precision to avoid losing material now. Both these pieces kind of loose. The accurate move, knight a3, is basically virtually, I think, well, it's one of the best moves. Okay, now knight a6 is really the blunder of the game, leaving, you know, a loose piece to be munched. In this position, okay, bishop g5 check or knight g3. Bishop g5 check first, now knight g3, and it's about equal actually. So, but you need a blunder for one side to win. It's not okay, it's, you really need that blunder now, otherwise black was doing okay. But after knight a6, now white's getting the advantage here with queen h5, exploiting the loose pieces. And this actually forces virtually bishop f6. There's no other decent move here. If knight g3, it's a total disaster. Just take with check and then take the knight. So bishop f6 is virtually the only move. Actually, bishop e7 is now mentioned as well. I mean, they both have the same kind of ideas potentially. So bishop e7, just briefly, let's check this out. It's still better for white in this position. Okay, it's still a little bit better for white. But in the game, this is much clearly better for white now. After just taking on h1. Also might be stronger just apparently rook e1 here is also apparently a reasonable good move. In fact, this could be more problematic than the game. So the rook being threatened immediately. So if we took here on e1, king takes, and the knight tries to escape now, queen f7. I think we have some new attacking possibilities here. So there's a threat here of queen g8 picking up the knight as well as attacking the bishop. And if bishop takes b2, knight b5 now threatens, knight takes d6 is looking dangerous. So this position, it seems black would be in an awkward state here. Check, check, d4. This is better for white by a long shot. Black just has got the material, but it's not really going anywhere. It's very difficult to do anything with it. Okay, so in the game we saw the move queen takes h1, which is quite good as well. And then we saw bishop takes b2, which is also making black's position a little bit worse. Best chance here, bishop g5 check, bishop e6, but still okay, it's a little bit better for white, but not as clear cut as the game, because the white king is having trouble here. The knights, the rooks having trouble. If white has to play d4 here, that's not a brilliant sign that white's got a crushing position. Okay, this kind of position here is looking a bit tricky all of a sudden for white. If black did go for the material, I think that might help white. Would help white's cause, but keeping the bishops in the centre like this and the rook kind of stranded, that's pretty dangerous for white, that position. But in the game, okay, so it was made much easier for white in the game continuation. We saw bishop takes b2 being played. So bishop takes b2, and now it's very clear that check is good for white after rook b1. And here black resigned. So it's just an interesting encounter between the two. Casual Game Paris 1858. I hope you enjoyed it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.